Good morning, everyone, and welcome along to today's briefing about the EdTech Innovation Network that we're building out with Western Sydney University, focused on the post-secondary market, higher education, universities, TAFEs, and private providers. And I'm going to be joined today by Cherie Diaz, who's the Executive Director of Innovation, and we'll meet her in a moment. But before I kick off, I'd like to spend a very brief moment acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. So, as we're gathered here today, physically dispersed but virtually connected, we should take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place. And in doing so, acknowledge all the traditional owners of the unceded lands from which we are conducting today's business. Personally, I'm joining you from the land of the Bunurong, Boiwurrung, and the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nations here in Melbourne. And Cherie, I think I got it wrong in a previous one, so I'll ask Cherie to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from where she's coming in just a moment. But I do, on behalf of all of us, extend our respect to elders past, present, and emerging. And I specifically acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are present with us today and express their gratitude for the care of the land, waters, and culture. And especially this week, as we head into the voice referendum on Saturday, and we have an opportunity as a country to extend even another olive branch and another sign of respect to traditional owners. So I'm looking forward to it later in this week. So I might welcome Sharia along before I outline our agenda for the day. So Cherie, welcome along. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. And just acknowledging that I'm joining from Parramatta, which is the land of the Darug people, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Fantastic, Cherie. So I'll set us up and I'll see you back here in a moment. I wanted to spend a few moments talking about the EdTech Innovation Network. So maybe, Sarah, can you share my slides? Because I think we've got that as the way of getting going. Okay. Our EdTech Innovation Network is really as an opportunity to build out deep connections between edtech companies, education providers, and researchers so that we can build collaboration through action. EduGrowth's remit, we're 7 years old now, and our remit is to help the Australian edtech ecosystem grow. And we know that education innovation requires engaged stakeholders committed to a vision far beyond their commercial needs or those of their institution. And we see that being able to do that through a scaffolded collaboration framework is a valuable process. You'll know that this work launches off some work that EduGrowth did with the Global Victoria team a few years ago. So we built the EdTech Innovation Alliance, which saw Victorian EdTech companies partner with a Victorian education provider and an international education provider being mentored and supported by a researcher to actually measure the efficacy. That work informed much of what we're doing in this process. It's given us insights as to how to build connection and collaboration through edtech companies and educators. And our model is reasonably simple. You may have heard of the idea of a triple helix model of innovation, and typically applies to any sector. So you'll see researchers, in this instance, universities, government actors who are typically providing funding and potentially policy settings, and then ultimately you get the entrepreneurs. And through that, what you end up with is innovation being driven or commercialized out of research space. Education technology is a bit different. I think we need to include at least one other actor. So we obviously want to have the edtech companies. We want to have the researchers who are deeply committed to education, innovation, and understanding what's best happening in our classrooms and our lecture halls and our workshops around the country. The education providers, whether they're schools, universities, vocational providers, or workforce. And in this instance, we're talking about the university, vocational, and private provider market. And ultimately, the actual educators, the classroom people, the people who are facing students every day, those who are teachers, academics, and trainers and so forth within that space. Our vision is really simple. We want to create an engagement framework for education providers to partner with ambitious edtech entrepreneurs, supported by world-class education researchers committed to reimagining learning in the digital age. And we see this as a collective impact program. There are benefits for all participants throughout the program, and today we're going to outline those programs for you. I want to share some of the thinking about where did this come from. The ultimate goal is to build this innovation brand across all of these actors. So we're building upon and borrowing from known models that exist. So Digital Promise is focused on the K-12 school space in the United States, and we have University Innovation Alliance in the United States. You can look up both of those entities. You can see the work that they do and how that we've taken some of their stuff, combined it with our programs to come up with these series of defined actions, scaffolded for participants to provide a framework for collaboration. It's about building thought leadership, shared understanding, and co-design so that we get a actual leadership across this community of practice and community of action. And ultimately, we want to create this brand halo for all stakeholders to be branded as innovative and committing to the longer term vision of building education. This is what the framework looks like. So as you go from the top to the bottom, we've got increasing complexity. You go from left to right, increasing the size of organizations. And in broad terms, we're going to unpack 3 or 4 of these key programs in a moment, but we're going to have an EdTech Innovation Action Group. So we don't want just people coming together and talking. We actually want to do some stuff. We'll have a feedback loop where we can get Voice of Educator, where we can use that capability to help EdTech companies clarify product market fit for their innovations and ideas and get to that to a faster point. We'll have mentoring for those early stage companies who want to understand how to build their product roadmap and how they need to start thinking about evidence right from the very first steps. We'll have proof of concept where you can do 8 to 12 week implementations and get some success. Pilot programs where we start doing efficacy. And most importantly, we want it to be an open framework. We want to share that capability across the sector and innovation symposium. So that's the framework. We're going to unpack that in a little bit more detail in a moment. But I think it's worth us spending a moment thinking about why we want to have a network. And I think this is where I hand over to you, Shuri.
Thank you. So for those that I haven't met, and I'll just call out, I can't actually see who is on the call today. My role at Western Sydney University, I commenced in August of last year. It's a newly created role as part of a 5-year strategic project that is focused on postgraduate transformation and meeting the needs of the sector, including learners, industry, government, etc., with not just a focus on fit for purpose learning experiences, whether that's a once-off micro-credential or further study or a full qualification. It's about the delivery models, and importantly, it's about the EdTech ecosystem in which we work to deliver that. So with that in mind, and a bit of my background being working within the EdTech sector itself. So prior to joining the university, I was Managing Director of Australia Open Learning for 4 years. I get the privilege of having been on both sides of the fence to look at, what are those points where we have the opportunity to build something that benefits all of those stakeholders that David has spoken to and makes it easier to be talking the same talk and quicker decision-making process as well. So why now? And I guess what context are we establishing this network within? I've been in education for 20 years, obviously not including my actual education experience itself as a student or an undergraduate student. But I think the one thing that's always been a constant in education, and particularly in the delivery of education, is that the only constant is change itself. But the pace is clearly increasing, and the pressures to meet all of those stakeholder needs is only growing, particularly with the pace of technological change, the difference in consumer demands, our increasing skill shortage from a labour market perspective, and the expectations as to the skills, competencies and capabilities that we produce graduates that can work in the workforce of today and the future as well. On the screen, obviously, there's some more recent reports and insights as to what's driving all of that. But realistically, what we're looking to do is acknowledge that no one institution is going to solve those challenges themselves. No one EdTech provider has all of the answers. It'd be awesome. I'm sure it would be a CIO's dreams to be able to go, that's the solution. But realistically, it's about how do we come together to be able to look at what are those pressing challenges, what are we tackling, what works in a particular context, how do we most easily demonstrate the evidence that that particular technology or that solution or product is helping to move the dial, so that it not only drives growth within the edtech sector, but from an education provider and an educator perspective, helps us to make sure that we're choosing, embedding, and optimizing how we're using the tools and systems and processes that are available as well. If you're able to click over to the next slide. Thanks, David. So in terms of how we're doing that at Western Sydney University and why we were so keen to be part of this network in particular, is I'm really privileged in my role in the team that we work within, and we sit within the education division at the university, is that we do have an EdTech Innovation Hub within Western Sydney and within the particular team that I work with, which is great. It's not about funding startups. It's about how do we build deeper and strategic partnerships with our EdTech partners? How do we make sure that we're getting the best use of those particular solutions within the ecosystem that we work in? How do we measure and prove that they're having the impact or improving the learning experience, etc., that we aimed to deliver in that particular instance, as well as where do we pull it into other areas of the university or the learning ecosystem as a whole? And whilst we're having great outcomes and experiences in doing that internally, we're really keen and excited about the opportunity to build a broader network, that one that not only enables us to develop relationships outside of the university in that particular EdTech Innovation Hub, but also so that we are contributing to the development, as David said, of that broader network and framework of tools and common dialogue and efficacy. So that evidence piece, that makes it easier to have those strategic conversations and that decision-making and buy-in process, that we're able to more quickly and nimbly make those decisions and get moving to address some of those challenges. I think there's one more slide if we can click over to, please. Awesome, thank you. So I think the key piece here is it is a network, but it's one based on action. We've all got great networks and part of communities of practice, etc. We're really keen as part of this process to establish and bring together stakeholders from across that network that are able to contribute to not only standing up the EdTech Innovation Network, but also looking at what are those real outcomes or measurements of success that collectively we can lay the foundation and gain scalability in the what and how we work together. I can see there's a question that's just popped up. What level of engagement are you looking for from EdTechs to participate, and what sort of commitment do you need? I might start this one and then David, you can jump in. I guess in the initial sense, what we're looking for as part of this is an expression of interest. So which EdTech partners or potential partners are keen to be part of that foundational piece of standing up the network and contributing to the roadmap, I guess, of what we're going to deliver. There will be opportunities at different stages of our program of works for EdTechs to pop in and out of the opportunities, whether that's a proof of concept or a pilot program as well. So in short, the answer is it varies, and it's not like you have to buy in now and stay for the next 10 years. It's really at this point, the key focus is being able to get those expression of interest for EdTech partners that are really interested and committed to helping establish the network itself. David?
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. And we're going to do a whole piece in a minute or so about engagement and what it might look like and why you want to be involved. But I'll disagree with you. I think once you join the network, why would you want to leave? Of course, you're going to be here for 10 years. You're going to help you on the. Of course, it's going to be the where everything's happening. Sherry, what are you talking about?
Oh, I agree. I guess I'm saying is, we're not asking for a 10-year commitment. We're not asking for you to name your first child after EduGrowth. But it's
tattoos are a requirement. What are you talking about?
Well,
all right. Obviously, yes, we are going to engage with the sector as companies need it, and we'll talk much more about that. But I wanted to outline for those edtech entrepreneurs and leaders that are with us today. I want you to pause and think a little bit about why this network may be beneficial to both you, the education providers and partners you work with, but also the country as a whole. And there is absolutely no doubt that building deep connection between edtech companies and education providers is a key component to building that remit that EduGrowth has, which is connect, collaborate, and accelerate. And we're very clear that we need to ensure that we build connections that are substantial and sustainable, I suspect, as well. So by being part of this program, you can refine your product market fit if you're an early stage company, because you'll get this opportunity to do voice of educator where you'll hear directly from people who are giving you feedback on your product. You'll contribute to the education innovation conversation across the country and give you an opportunity to be part of that conversation and not just buy into a trade show like an EduTech or a Universities Australia or a Quartet conference, which are all great things, but you can actually embed that across your entire program. You can start to build out your evidence record for the edtech products that you're building. And it's very funny, in my head, we did a similar session of this a day or so ago where we were talking to educators. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I want to go back a step on evidence records. There is a absolute global push across the education sector to ensuring that edtech products that are being purchased using public funding have an evidence record. And you're seeing programs out of the United States, like ESSA is an example, ESSA, which has, I think it's 4 or 5 levels of evidence. You're seeing it out of Europe now. You're starting to see them. You're seeing Aero, I think, have got a 3 level of evidence. And there's no doubt that you need to start building that evidence record. You need to start getting people outside of your organization and outside of your customer base doing verification. So the EdTech Innovation Alliance Network is a definite way that you can go about doing that and beginning that process. It's about analyzing the efficacy of your edtech products. We keep talking about this term efficacy all the time across the sector. And I sometimes think it's one of the most misused or misunderstood terms. Efficacy is a very simple concept, sorry, a very complex concept, but you can break it down to a simple statement, which is what is the impact of the intended audience of your product when it's deployed the way that it was designed to be deployed? And the last two pieces are really important. The audience that you designed it for and the deployed the way that you designed it. Efficacy can only be measured in those contexts. And sometimes these frameworks don't necessarily deal with that. And we have a framework out of the Global Victoria EdTech Innovation Alliance model. The professors who did the work as lead researchers, so Professor Margaret Bierman, Professor Phil Dawson, and Professor Michael Henderson from Monash and Deakin, respectively. Oh, sorry, the other way around, Deakin and Monash, respectively. Created a framework which is it's called PF, so it's product implementation, uh, acceptability and feasibility, and it's a way of measuring efficacy based upon the perceptions from your customers and the impact of it, at the evidence record as well. So that'll be a key component of what we do as we build out these programs. Okay, so let's talk about the framework and then let's pull apart some of the concepts so that we've got a bit of a understanding of what we're talking about. Okay, so I just need to get myself a little bit clearer on the structure here. I'm going to jump forward and then come back, actually. I'll just change my thinking pattern here. So across a year, this is what the EdTech Innovation Network will do. These are the activities. So you'll have this action group that will meet each quarter. We'll do Voice of Educator 2 or 3 times. We'll do some mentoring a couple of times. We'll do a cohort of proof of concept twice a year. We'll do a cohort of the pilot program twice a year, and we'll do an innovation symposium once a year. And obviously in our launch year, that'll be heavily back-ended, and we'll do more in the later half of the year than in the beginning of the year, just to manage people's expectations. I want to go back to the framework a little bit and unpack it for you. The idea of the innovation network and the action group is to ensure that we have a quarterly conversation around the important things happening in education technology right now. As a little example, it might be that we spend a half day thinking about what does the implication of generative artificial intelligence mean for education and education technology companies from a ethical delivery framework, where we might bring in an expert speaker to talk to us about that. We come up with a framework and we connect that back to the government policy stuff that's happening. We then may have an opportunity where we'll then have an opportunity for people to meet one-on-one with educators to be able to show their product, show their product roadmap, and get feedback and get support in making sure that it's embedded within the key programs that are happening at a national and a state level. Cherie, in her one of her slides, she showed, I think it was 6 or 7 images of big frameworks and big documents that are happening in the sector right now. For example, in the higher education space, what does the Accord mean? Where is it going? What impact may or may not have on your education institution from a technology perspective, or from your edtech company from a development perspective? We'll then set up mentoring connections for those early stage companies, predominantly with more established edtech entrepreneurs, so they can provide some support. Proof of concept, 8 to 12 week structured implementation program where you can show the impact of your product within the context of that environment. Pilot programs where we start doing research, and then a symposium where you start sharing that. And we will unpack 2 or 3 of those more in just one moment. So let's pull apart 2 or 3 of those components so that we've got clear understanding of what they are, and then we'll talk about how you engage. And then we'll start talking about expression of interest and so forth. In fact, I think we're about to do that right now. Sorry, I got my slides out of order, Cherie. Over to you.
Oh, good. I guess we'll start here, and then we can come back to it, because it's really, as we said at the beginning, this is an opportunity for you guys to ask questions of us about what the network is and how you can get involved.
I keep forgetting to do that. People in my other ear tell me, don't forget to tell them to ask questions. You can ask questions, put them in the Q&A box, and they end up with us here on the stage. So thank you for doing that piece for me, Cherie.
Yeah, David and I talk all the time, so it's good to have other people ask us questions. And we do have one. I can see there's one up there that we will come back to. But realistically, what we are looking for is expressions of interest, so that we start to have those deeper level conversations and can move into the planning stage of the network. David will shortly go through, some of those examples or outputs from the network in a little bit more detail to talk through the role and the stakeholders that will be involved. But the key focus is that we are working at the moment to establish that foundational action group. And we want active and representation from the edtech sector. One thing I do want to make a point of, and it was a question that was raised yesterday in the educator session of this, is that it is called the Higher Education EdTech Innovation Network. That is representative of post-secondary. So it's not a university-only initiative. It's not a vocational-only initiative. It is recognizing that more and more those big papers and reports and those challenges are showing that as a sector we need to work collectively to address some of those, and they're not as easily segmented as what may have been. So we are looking for representation across educators, education institutions, and edtech companies that work across that breadth of the sector as well. David, over to you.
Did you want to do this piece? I think you did this yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So we've already touched on this a little bit. What we are looking for is up to 24 participants across those 4 stakeholder groups. As you can see, us listing 10 to 12 edtech companies shows that we want real representation from across the sector to be part of this conversation, because it's not just a case of what does the education provider need to be able to demonstrate or have insight to make those decisions. It's also about building common understanding of where we're coming from, building the consistent or common dialogue, understanding more deeply the needs from each of those stakeholder groups, as well as how do we work together towards that roadmap. David's touched on, the half-day workshop opportunities, guest speakers, etc. Really, it is also about what are the outputs. So what are those frameworks, thought leadership pieces and opportunities, white papers, etc. If I'm going to pick on my previous employer, being Open Learning, if I look at some of the conversations I used to have when I was in the organisation with potential and existing education provider partners, there were consistent themes as to the challenge between how do you know it does what you say it does, and the evidence capability, being able to demonstrate that in a way that builds that trust and evidence or efficacy output, as well as on the flip side, working within education providers, not just at the university, but in the colleges that I've run previously, is the ability to have that at your fingertips, to be able to make like-for-like comparisons or easier decision-making processes within it as well. And then there's also the benefit that we get from tackling those challenges together. So we're really looking forward to working with a robust and really experienced and passionate group of people.
Absolutely agree with that one as well. And it's important to note that the outputs here, we may get this question, but we'll address it up front. We got it yesterday, which is around data sharing. So from an EdTech company perspective, it's really important to note that we want you to share the outputs and the outcomes of your projects, but we don't want you to share student data usage stuff. We don't want to share any data that is underprivileged in some way, shape, or form. So there will be no requirement for that. And all projects will be ethically signed off by the lead research partner. So you'll be assured that there'll be nothing that will leak from this project to anywhere else that you don't want, and don't breach any of your other things. And
there's a couple of, before we move on, David, there's a couple of questions that I think might be worth chatting about. So one of them is there evidence or examples that models like this work in practice? Do you want to start with your experience, David?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's models around the world that show this, but locally, EduGrowth did the Global Victoria EdTech Innovation Alliance, which was funded by the state government of Victoria. From that project, that was a very much in the pilot project phase of our network and our framework. But essentially, what happened was 9 Victorian EdTech companies were partnered with a local Victorian education provider, whether it was a school, a university, or a TAFE. I think there may have been one workforce association or accrediting body in there. They then also had to partner with an international provider so that the project was deployed locally and internationally at the same time. A research mentor was appointed so that they could assess what evidence are you going to collect. Is that evidence real and substantive? It will make an impact. And then they implemented their product for 3 to 6 months, just depended upon each product was slightly different and each project was slightly different. The end result of that is all 9 projects showed efficacy. 8 of those projects signed commercial agreements with their partners, both locally and internationally, and has generated more than $10 million worth of revenue for those companies on an annual basis going forward. And there was about $12 or $13 million raised by those edtech companies because this brand halo helped them in those conversations. I'm sure we can't take claim for all of that capital it was generated, and I hope that the product was the driving force of that. So yeah, there is evidence of that. There's also evidence from other parts of the world. University College London do something very similar in the K-12 school space. And there's a couple of others. There's the Finland EdTech Alliance, and there's I think it's called the EdTech Collider, which is based in one of the Scandi countries. I don't recall off the top of my head where it was. So yes, there are models around the world. Did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I guess what I would add to it is the experience that we have within the EdTech Innovation Hub at the university is that the process we've put in place and the conversations we're having with those already within our learning ecosystem shows a real commitment from our EdTech partners and an interest to have that ongoing feedback. So it's not just here's a pilot or a proof of concept and we embed, but we're really privileged to be feeding into ongoing roadmaps and saying, hey, here's the challenge we're having. do you have a solution, or what are you guys thinking? Are you hearing this from other partners? And realistically, we're looking to do that in a more structured and scalable way. So I think there's both the published and output perspective to the evidence of these networks and models working, but then there's also how do we help build a collective understanding of established strategic partnerships between education providers and EdTech as well, so that it's an ongoing and deep relationship to support the network.
Absolutely. So let's jump into some components of the program. So let's talk about the voice of educator. This is an incredibly important way. So one of the byproducts of the EdTech Innovation Alliance was very clear to me. The research mentor that they worked with almost become a default product refiner for them, almost a default part of their product team. Because what they were doing was asking the hard questions of, if you claim to impact these 50 things, how do you show evidence on more than 2 or 3 of them? How do you find which is the most important? And what I kept referring back to a part of the outline or part of the program, which was substantial and sustained. So substantial means more than some kids liked it. It actually is that it impacted the thing that you said you were going to do from an education perspective. And sustain means that it's not just a one-off. You can actually continue to repeat it. So that's what you're going to get from the voice of educator. And with all of these frameworks changing all the time, one of the things that these educators and researchers bring to your product team is very much a capacity for you to understand what are the top of mind things for your prospective customer. It's about improving product market fit, and it's about bringing educator skills to the edtech sector. You will be hopefully positively surprised by how amazing the training of educators can apply to your edtech environment. And it's about building meaningful connections. We then can move into a proof of concept. So EduGrowth has defined a EdTech proof of concept model that we've used multiple times. So the project plans will set up for 8 to 12 weeks. It has a series of defined actions and feedbacks and roles for both the edtech company and the educator that you're deploying with. And the output will be a case study. So in your evidence record, you're starting to build evidence where you're starting to get your customers talking about the impact of their product on your implementation, not just you yourself. You're getting that verified by an external body. So it's important to start seeing those things and getting them into what you're doing. And the proof of concepts will happen twice a year. When you're setting up a proof of concept, it'll either be someone from the network that you go and engage with, or you can bring external partners along to that proof of concept if you already have those relationships as well. We then start getting into a pilot program where we're starting to get some really serious stuff going on here. So the program type project plans extend out to 4 to 6 months in length. It uses the model that we've defined from the EdTech Innovation Alliance. We'll appoint a research mentor to guide the implementation and act as a critical friend. It's important to note that the role is to be a research mentor, not your personal on-time, full-time staff member doing research for you. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to meet with you multiple times over your project. They're going to give you a series of templates to complete and respond to, and then they'll provide ongoing sort of mentoring, if you like. At the end of it, you're going to end up with a case study, including an efficacy analysis, and you'll get to present your findings at the EdTech Innovation Network Symposia that we do once a year, or at least once a year. So you'll get those components. So we might grab some of these questions because they're really directly related to where we are right now. I want to just make sure, yeah, okay, this is a nice place to segue for them. So let's go. I think we've answered 2 or 3 of these. The question that we've got here is, as an EdTech, how do you suggest we get institutions on board to partner for this program? So I've got a view, but did you want to tackle this one, Cherie?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, and I'll potentially touch on one of the other questions whilst we're at it, is I think it depends. So for some of you, it might be a case of when you're early stage conversations and there's a particular use case or an opportunity to do a proof of concept or a pilot, with an intention to extend or sign a larger deal or a multi-year deal, as an example. For more established or embedded partnerships within existing providers, there's also an opportunity as you're rolling out, is it new functionality or into a new part of the provider, etc., where you're able to use an established partnership to test and demonstrate the efficacy of a new product, a new solution, or the evolution of your particular edtech product that also produces further buy-in, potentially helps the renewal process or adoption with other providers, because not only are you demonstrating that and deepening the relationship with your existing partner, but you've also got that depth of partnership experience that feeds into the work that gets produced and you can talk to in further conversations as well. David, anything from you?
I think I'll add on to that as well around the established companies piece. I think it's really important. Like, I get the can we pop up that question, Sarah, if you can do that? Because I think that would be helpful for me anyway. I see great value in the EdTech Innovation Network for early and emerging EdTechs. However, can more established EdTechs with long-standing customers participate? I think that there are multiple people are going to benefit from it, but absolutely 100% established companies are going to benefit, because in almost every instance, the most successful EdTech companies that I see globally actually have evidence core into their product. So, but what I would also argue is that getting access to quality, understanding of efficacy takes time and commitment, and getting connections with those education academics and researchers is really not the easiest thing in the world to do. So through the network, we'll be able to utilize our established relationships and connections to be able to support you in that process and build that out. So there's absolutely a role in doing this. Sarah, can you pick the other question? I have just done this can you just, because I can't read that whole question on my screen. No, not that one. We just did that one. I have just done this in my company and I can't see the rest of the question.
I think it's just in the last 2 weeks, okay. Which is great.
So we'll take that as a comment then. I'm missing the question bit.
Yeah. Are the educators involved? Yep, sorry, go on, David.
Go.
Are the educators involved in institutions, or will it be individual interested academics? So again, it depends on the particular level or type of program that we're working with. In general, it'd be educators within the education institution that you're partnering with, but the research mentors will be outside of that institution, so that degree of separation as well. And I think the other one is, what timing are we working to? What if we can't get buy-in straight away? Do you want to tackle this one, or I'm happy to?
Yeah, I think the reality is that we are going to launch. Well, this is our launch, I guess. This is part of our launch, and we're going to build that out over a period of time. But I think the timing will be that we'll do that over. We're looking for expression of interest now. We're going to really ramp up in 2024. So you don't need to buy in straight away. You can buy in as it is. And to be honest, you're going to also see, as you grow, as we grow the network, we would expect demand will increase as well. So I think that there's a combination as well there.
Awesome. We see resources like AWS startup programs on the EduGrowth website. Would like to know how we can access these.
That's a question offline, not connected to the EdTech Innovation Network, but happy to answer that. Send us an email at hello@edugrowth.org.au and we'll answer that question for you. Okay, we might move on then, and we'll talk about the next steps and the role for EdTech companies and so forth. So let me get the next screen. And somehow I've managed to put the wrong slides up on my screen. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second and get the right slides. Sarah, can you take that off screen? Okay, awesome. Just give me 1 second, Tree, because I have a specific thing for EdTech companies that I want to bring up.
Yeah, whilst you're bringing that up, I'll also call out that there is an event next Thursday afternoon in Sydney and available online. So there's also a further opportunity that if after this and the information that's shared, if you go away and have more questions and that sort of stuff, I'll be there talking at one of the sessions, and obviously David and the team will be there as well because they're hosting it. So there's also a further opportunity to have a follow-up conversation if you've got more questions after this, as well as the fact that we will share email addresses so that you can reach out if you've got questions or want to chat further.
I found my slide. I hid it. I had it hidden as a hidden slide, and I didn't unhide the right slide. So edtech companies. Okay. So it's very important to note for edtech companies, want you to build collegiate relationships with educators and education researchers. You need to develop an evidence record for your edtech solution and via feedback, proof of concept and efficacy, and contribute to the national conversation on education innovation. There's a membership fee for an edtech company. If you're a scale-up, it's $2,500. If you're an established company, it's $5K, which gives you access to the edtech action group, which is where you're building those collegiate relationships. You get identified as a network member. You can nominate one company representative to participate in the program. Voice educator sessions, there's no limitation to them. As long as there's educators who want to keep talking to you about your product, we'll keep doing connections. Proof of concepts, ultimately projects will be selected by education partners, and there'll be a process of connecting edtech companies and education providers. And their fees will apply for doing a proof of concept. Depending upon the size of your project and the size of your company, it'll scale between $10,000 and $25,000 for a proof of concept. If you wanted to do a pilot program where you're starting to get a researcher involved and you're starting to get deep understanding of the efficacy of product, then again, fees will apply. It'll be $20,000 to $35,000 depending upon the size of your company and the project that you're building. You'll get to showcase your edtech solution at the symposia for no cost, and you'll get complimentary tickets to the symposia so that you can share with your education partners and showcase your capability. And if you think in context of things like having a booth at a trade show or having a round table at a large symposia or being a sponsor at one of these programs, these are very reasonable fees for the degree of engagement that you get. So we now have, if you've got any questions that you want to ask offline specifically of myself or Sheree, our contact details here. We've got questions keep coming in, so we'll keep answering them as they come in. And I'll just get Sarah, if you can just sort of go through the questions that are that we haven't answered, because I don't have them all. So why don't I go with this one? Our products and programs are mostly for K-8 students, but we also have some programs, new design modules that are suitable up to grade and would be a good fit for this program. No. You are not a good fit for this EdTech Innovation Network. This is a higher education one. We will in 2024 launch a K-12 specific program, and that's where we would love to see you participate. There may be some opportunities for you to do some voice of educator, but that would be outside of this and just part of a standard EduGrowth program. You want to have a go at this one?
Oh, I think I covered that one already.
Oh, we did this one. Okay, awesome.
I think another one is, can we have your definitions of established and scale up?
Yes, so the definitions for a scale up and the definition for an edtech an established company comes from EduGrowth membership module. So if your revenue is greater than, I think it's $3 million, then we consider you an established company. If your revenue is below $3 million, we can consider you a scale up. And there's also a number of employees definition there. But in simple terms, don't be too worried about the label. The reality is we ask you to self-nominate. We're not going to go back to you and say, hey, we think that you're trying to, join the network for a reduced fee. That's not going to happen. So you will self-nominate once you go through that expression of interest process. I think that's probably...
Oh, there's one more.
Yep, there is an annual fee, which I described before. Scale-ups are $2,500, established companies are $5,000. And then if you want to procure a proof of concept or a pilot project, then there may be additional fees. And note that in some instances, there will be education providers who may go out and say, hey, look, we are going to fund 3 proof of concepts, a pilot project that fits within our network because this is what we want to do. So there may be a co-contribution model instead of all of that fee being covered. There may be philanthropic for funding that may support some of those stuff, or state government programs as well.
Yeah, I think it's also worth just talking about that, that Western Sydney University's principal partner is committed to the establishment and ongoing support of the network. So we've already committed to 3 years of supporting the network itself, and obviously expect that to continue right through to the 10 years that David mentioned earlier and beyond.
Fantastic.
One more was, how do we build realistic goals for participating? David, do you want to start that one?
I'll talk from an EdTech perspective, and I might ask you to do that from an educator provider perspective. From my end, if you're an EdTech company and you're a scale up, I think the goal should be reasonably simple for you. What I would be wanting to do if it was when I was running my own EdTech startup and scale up was I would want to come to each of the action group meetings because that's where you build connection and collaboration. You get to think about your business and you're working on it and not in it. So I think that's an incredibly important point. So I would set attendance metrics and KPIs for that. Whilst you're there, it would also be setting up post those event conversations. So you want to go and meet with some of those educators outside of the environment so that you're starting to build that environment. I would then be saying, okay, so now I want to get some feedback on my product. So I would be looking to bring a specific idea that you want to get some feedback onto the voice educator. And then you might be saying, well, okay, you know what? In 2024, I want to do proof of concept with some new education providers that we haven't connected with. And in 2025, I want to do a pilot project where we're getting some efficacy research. They're the things that I would be setting. I would probably also be thinking about how do you put the calendar, the symposium in your calendar so you've got it there so you don't book to be somewhere else offshore at another event or a conference or a summit or something like that. So that's what I think from an EdTech company. Did you want to say from an educator provider perspective, Sheree?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to draw on my experience from within EdTech as to why I'm calling out some of these. Is, one of the hardest bits I used to find is when we'd get asked, what data can I get access to, or that sort of stuff. And if I'd go back with, cool, what are your measurements of success, or what problem are you trying to tackle? Sometimes there weren't clear answers. So from an education provider perspective, it's being able to bring forward those, what are the measurements of success in choosing, piloting, etc., embedding technology in our ecosystem or our learning solutions. It's about being able to understand what are those key lessons, what is happening in other areas of the sector that we can learn about and draw upon and bring back into the conversation so that we're also building up that network and understanding within the sector itself. It's about being able to change the dialogue or grow the depth of understanding of what strategic partnerships look like with our EdTech partners, not just within the university that I work for, but within and across providers as a whole. And one of the key pieces we're also keen to do is, obviously there's established associations and networks already working in different elements, whether that's Ascalite, ACODE, David mentioned Corded earlier, etc. What we're also looking to do is we're looking to view this as the network is an important piece of work, and how do we then extend awareness of the work and the output that's being created so that we're building and developing greater understanding as a whole.
Awesome. I think there's one question we didn't answer, which somebody has just mentioned to me. So as an EdTech, how do you suggest we get institutions on board to partner for this program? Well, that's an interesting question. I think out loud about this. So firstly, I think the network will have some education partners in it already, and that'll be a key role that EduGrowth and Western Sydney University do and build out. But I think this is a great opportunity for you to show your leadership beyond selling to your customer and your prospects, and you can bring them along to an action group meeting as a way of getting them to understand what's going to happen. And also consider the following: if you're close to trying to get the close with a customer, you might suggest to them that through this program they can do a proof of concept that will help them show that the product's going to embed in their environment without all of the complexity, or gives them a greater degree of trust in the outcomes that it might happen. So they're the things that I would be thinking about. Well, I think that gets us very close towards the end of the process. You can express interest to join the program. There's the address, so it's the edugrowth.org.au website /EIN, and that will take you to a little bit more outline of the program. And at the bottom, there's an expression of interest form. You can complete that. So I think that's probably it. Cherie, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your partnership in the EdTech Innovation Network, and I look forward to kicking off.
Likewise, and thanks for all the questions and for joining everyone that's online.
Fantastic. Thanks.